Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to RaC Guild number 21. And as we were saying before we started this evening, can't believe we've done 21 of these town halls. It's good, it's excellent. And tonight's particularly, it's tonight for me here in New Zealand. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This evening we have the lovely Matti Schneider from OpenFisca with us. There was a brilliant event a few weeks ago. It was actually March, which just feels like yesterday, but it wasn't. And there was a lot that happened in 2 days in Canberra with the OpenFisca Association. So that's what Matti's going to tell us about this evening. So he's had a little bit of time to synthesize what happened there too. So I'm really looking forward to this. It was sponsored by Salsa and INRA and Assemblic, which are projects and organizations that we know a little bit about in the RaC Guild. But yeah, looking forward to hearing a lot about it this evening. Questions and answers, and I'm sure there'll be lots of them at the end. Matti, over to you. Welcome. Thank you for coming along.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. Before I start, just a word of warning. I've been having bronchitis for the last week, so my voice is a bit rusty, and I might have to just stop and cough for a few times. So sorry for that. So thank you so much for providing us with this platform for international cooperation. I love how the rules as code community is such a distributed and global one across time zones, and how for me right now it's morning and not evening. I'm actually back in the EU. And I'm going to recap this event that took place in Oceania. And in a way, I feel like I've been doing this back and forth for quite a few times. I also wanted to thank Jason for the Rules as Code EU recap that he gave at the last event. He's not there today, but I really like how there's this idea of reporting on events that happen in one area of the globe, and how we can then make that a bit broader, because of course there's more that happens when you're on site than what you can get even through recordings. So having a bit of this insider knowledge feels like, to me, like quite a good use of this platform that you've been creating. So thanks again for offering us with that. After the coughing warning, another one, a disclaimer. Of course, I'm not in the same situation as Jason last time. I'm one of the organizers of the event, so I might be biased. I'm not just another participant, and I will only tell you about all the great things that happened, and not about anything that went wrong. But the good thing is, like, a few people who are present in this call were actually present in person as well. So they will be there to correct me if I say anything wrong. So we had this event indeed in Canberra in Australia. So that was the yearly OpenFisca Conference. The previous one was in Paris. And our intention is to have those every year on a different continent, because of how global the adoption of OpenFisca is. So our footprint is really kind of everywhere, of course, at different levels of maturity. And it made a lot of sense for us to go to Australia this year, because our second biggest user base, after Europe and France in particular, is in that region, especially in Australia, but overall in the Pacific region. For those of you who have followed a bit the history with the Better Rules report and where people have been moving around, you can understand how this all came to be, with Australia and New Zealand leading the charge a few years back. And Australia in particular had this multi-year whole of government adoption strategy that led them to have a lot to share. So it made a lot of sense for us to go there this year, and it kind of nicely sits at the antipodes of Europe. So we're kind of federating a broader range of the community. So OpenFisca is the most used rules as code system engine at this time, but altogether, rules as code is still quite niche. So we wanted to have an event that appeals to a broader audience, and so we built this event as 2 days. One that was focused more on policy innovation. Of course, rules as code is both an end in itself as a bit of policy innovation, but also a support for more initiatives related to policy innovation. So our goal there was to appeal to more policymakers and anyone who works with policy, which of course is more than who works with rules as code, and share ideas there, learn, and also showcase a few use cases for rules as code. And the second day was more focused on rules as code itself and OpenFisca in particular. You can find all the details of the program, of the schedule of the event on our website. I will share that later, or if someone here can drop the link, it's on our website. So we had basically half days, and I'm going to share a bit about my highlights there. So in the first day, we had panels and discussions. The overall takeaways from my perspective is that, well, in the last 20 years, it seems like policy innovation is still about having more participation, more transparency, improved delivery, increasing trust in policymaker, and testing the policies before delivering them. So I wouldn't say that it's learning here, because for anyone who has been involved with policy for some time, I feel like the sense of urgency is still as urgent. So I guess we're still not fully delivering on those, but it's useful as a takeaway to note that there are still calls for more of those. I also note, and of course that's biased because of the way we created the event, but still, rules as code does feel like a very relevant solution to many of these calls for more participation, transparency, trust, and so on and so forth. And I can't be sure that there is a broader realization that rules as code is part of the solution because of how biased this event was towards rules as code. It is my intuition. What I can say, however, and what can be useful for anyone doing any form of lobbying in that space, is that I noticed that the phrasing around digital twins is back in hype, which is interesting because if you've been working in that space, you might remember that digital twins were more a thing in the construction field, maybe 10 years ago. So basically, this idea that we should model reality so we can check the physical constraints before we build things that are costly, expensive, and that might fall onto people and kill them. So sounds like a good idea, right? Turns out policy is kind of the same. It's costly to build, it's costly to deliver, and if you make it wrong, then it can kill people. So it actually does make sense that we want to make digital twins. And I think this is precisely what we've been arguing on for rules as code for quite some time. But I do take note that since last year in the EU, and now I could see also this more globally, the term digital twin is coming back, specifically for policy. So a hint for all of you involved in that work to take from my perspective. Now, I wanted to share a few highlights on these morning panels, and I did not take the time to make slides, but you can find all of these recordings. So the first one was a panel from Catherine Althaus from Australia, who shared how policy innovation could feed on other systems of governance and of thinking than the ones for which we build policy, and specifically about how bringing some Aboriginal perspective in the Australian context for policy making could made a lot of sense. And so she gave some specific examples and argued for this idea of drawing intuition and innovation from other lines of thinking than the ones that we try to regulate, which I find very interesting, of course, from an inclusion perspective, and so it's aligned with my values. But beyond that, you know this aphorism that you can't solve a problem with the same reasoning that led to it in the first place, and I find that quite relevant. So once more, this is much broader than rules as code, and I'm not sure what would be the takeaway specifically for the rules as code community, but for policy innovation, it does make a lot of sense. And I like how rules as code could enable testing such systems much faster. Another highlight from my perspective was Koichiro Shiratori's presentation on how the Japanese community could organize itself through technology, and sharing how rules as code there. So Haruko is present here and gave a speech on day 2 about how Japan had this adoption of rules as code and is still going through this adoption at government level, and I will talk about it a bit later. But Koichiro's presentation was more about the community organization side of things, and I found that very representative of what I've witnessed in many countries. And I wanted to highlight this here once more for people who are doing lobbying, who are supporting adoption. Because here it starts with a problem that's felt by community, namely the complexity of the social security system, and a solution that is being prototyped in the context of a hackathon. Once more, I've seen this system for benefits assessment tools in at least 5 different jurisdictions. The community feels the problem. The problem is also known by government, but it has to be solved by community. For some reason, it's the people who feel it most who want to organize themselves. And there's there's a hackathon, there's some event that catalyzes this problem and matches it with a technical solution specifically, which is then prototyped, gathers some attention, and is put into production. And then it starts being impactful. And this then draws the attention of government, because there's a solution that's been there. Whereas government was in the first place probably the most relevant and the most well-funded actor for providing this, but for some reason was not able to think this solution through. And so having this solution put out by community draws the attention of government, which then tries to reproduce it or scale it in some way. And we're precisely at this moment in Japan where Project Inclusive's benefits assessment simulator, which we had shared, I think, probably 1.5 years ago, has now signed a partnership with GovTech Tokyo, the innovation agency for the Tokyo prefecture, and is now being scaled. So there's a government tool, Benefit Navigator, which I will talk a bit on later, that takes away some of the learnings there. So it's not just taking it as it and scaling it, it's like bringing a government angle to it and adding some different features. And that's how we know rules as code to be so useful. Based on this first use case, now that they have the OpenFisca model, they have other reuses than the benefits simulator. They also have conferences that build on reports for policy impact that they can easily make thanks to the model. They have educational programs with going to junior high school and showing to students and to pupils how themselves and their families are entitled to benefits. And these people will then propagate this to their families. So this is quite an innovative way to deliver policy. Another thing that I do note is how the Institute for Poverty Prevention, the NGO who is backing this project, has an international scale, and how Canada is now getting interested again through its civil society to modeling rules as code with OpenFisca, as was the case several years ago for those who were aware of this. So I will talk more about Canada later, but this presentation by Koichi Osada I found fascinating for how it really embodies this scaling from civil society feels a problem all the way to it now has international impact and is adopted by government. My third highlight, I have four for the day one, don't worry, is the ingredients for policy infrastructure presentation by Hamish Fraser, who's a senior contributor at the OpenFisca Association. And I loved how he reframed policy infrastructure for once not through technical terms, but reminding us of the fact that it's mostly all about governance. That the topics are, how do we create trust? How do we reinforce accountability in this system? Because we're talking a lot about the performance of the systems and how they can increase efficiency, for example. That's one of the angles. Hopefully, there's also more fair treatment because of the encoding of the interpretation of rules, as opposed to arbitrary decision-making by organs of government. But it's true that there is a risk that is very intrinsic to rules as code, where we could delegate accountability to machines, right? And I gave recently an interview with Beth Novak, as I was saying that if we end up with a situation where we just say computer says no all the time, or computer sent you to jail, well, you know, that's the way it is. Yeah, now your sister has to live on the street because a computer said that she cannot, she's not eligible for rent support anymore. It's just a few years before we just burn all the computers down. There is this big question of how do we make sure that there is accountability in the system, and how rules as code can be support for more accountability. And Hamish really raised these questions and gave this as food for thought. How do we create more trust? And I agree that there's still a huge lot to do there. One of the solutions he pointed at in the end, and with which I wholeheartedly agree, is just red team everything. Any innovation that you're delivering, before you put it out, try really hard to exploit it yourselves before you make that public. How can it be abused? How can it yield to bigger problems than the ones you were supposed to solve in the first place, right? And only by taking this angle will you be able to provide enough safety in your system before delivery that you can be really sure of what you're doing, right? In the agile world, we used to call those evil stories as opposed to user stories. And so for anyone who's been working in the security field, this is known from the angle of cybersecurity. But as we're working with systems that deal with policy and that have an impact on human lives, also being able to figure out what would be the potential impact for individuals and how they might facilitate abuse of power, I think is very, very critical. Maybe one part of the solution, and sorry, I'm just changing hats here, but giving a bit of my perspective on this one. For years now, I've said that most probably for rules as code system, I believe that they could enable more accountability by having a way to somehow switch gears, you know, that it's sort of fully automated in most of the cases, but that agents, human agents, should also be provided in exchange more power. Because we would have this baseline where everything works well, but that any individual human agent should be able to just stop the machine and say, for this specific case, I'm going to override the decision because I know better than the machine. And I feel that we can enable this more frequently if we have this baseline, because then any divergence from the standard treatment is immediately seen and highlighted. So we have the whole accountability. So I believe that the current system, where there's a lot of arbitrary decisions that are made, but that are very constrained because human agents feel like they are taking a lot of risk by making those, but they're also absolutely necessary for the system to work, could be somehow compensated by streamlining most of the decisions. And for the ones that fall out of these standard cases, giving more power, more agency to the humans there. And it's very easy then to have a sort of a monthly accountability meeting where you would have to explain why for these cases you chose to override the decision. And that can also feed back into the rules as code system itself. So I think it's a very virtuous process. And it also makes it very, very obvious to check if there are cases of corruption or suspicion, because if you start making a lot of divergence, then you're kind of standing out from the other normal number of corrections. So I do believe that our systems and rules as code can absolutely enable more accountability. And I really want to insist on the fact that that it's a choice in the delivery system whether we enable these tools to decrease accountability by hiding behind the computers, or whether we take this as an opportunity to increase accountability and transparency. All right, my last highlight was the opening keynote, so the first one in the sequence, and was by Michael Outram, who's a former commissioner for border in Australia. And he shared about his view on architecture for digital policy. So a bit like Hamish, but this time we're talking architecture in a much more technical sense. And he decomposed his suggestion for how we could architect digital policy design and delivery in 3 layers. First, an operational level of digital twins. So where we would model the flows in the systems, like flows in people, flows in money, flows in everything, right? You really map out how things are actually moving around. And I think this is more of the usage of the word digital twin that we've been used to. Then this second layer, which would be the policy twin, so really rules as code. And finally, a third layer, which are sandboxes. So the testing environment where you combine the two, so the actual movements, or rather the models of the movement of things, and the policies and how they impact these flows. And in this view, we would be able to have the full environment, because it's true, if we just have rules as code, as most of you know, if you just have the rules but no data, no population data, it's really hard to assess the impact, right? So we kind of distinguish the two. And so for Michael, this was the naming more broadly this data as operational twins and policy twins for rules as code, and how the combination of the two in secure environments, so sandboxes, would enable all of the benefits that we've seen with rules as code. I liked how there was this naming of things that we all have an experiential experience for. Another point that stood out was how he believed that this level of innovation would only succeed through federation rather than centralization. And of course, this fully aligns with the OpenFisca technical architecture, but also the way we are building these systems socially, right? By having an open source system that enables collaboration across agencies, across ministries, even across governments, and where you can have expertise that is encoded through the actual poles of expertise and consolidated into one view, as opposed to creating one central agency that would be responsible for modeling everything and then distributing it to everyone else. Yes, this is also what we strongly believe with OpenFisca. And he concluded his speech by a call for extending rules as code from the fiscal and social policies, which indeed was a lot, but it has already expanded quite more broadly, but putting it into production for national security, for trade, for border governance, which coming from someone with this expertise is quite encouraging, right? Someone who has been working on border control for years, telling you that it's more than right for rules as code. I find that very, very interesting. So that were my highlights for the morning of day one. Of course, we had many other panels and sessions, and I encourage you to have a look at the recordings and the schedule to see what could be in there for you. The afternoon were workshops. They were not recorded. It was really more experiential, about connections. So it was really putting people who had come all the way to talk about policy innovation in a situation to actually try out innovation. So how would you conceive, how would you design, how would you deliver policy differently with different prompts? And I think it was more about creating these connections that go beyond your usual colleagues. I'm just going to cough a bit and then I'll talk about day two. Sorry. So day two, as you remember, more focused on rules as code and OpenFisca specifically. So we had this beautiful keynote. Honestly, finding my 4 highlights for this one was really hard because, of course, I've curated this whole program and I really love all of it. The goal that I had when designing this was, of course, for the people to gather and to share important elements, but also, let's be honest, to produce some material that we could all collectively reuse for rules as code promotion. So that's why in the morning keynote, there's a lot more than just OpenFisca, and that we had rather short interventions. And I really hope that that you all can use these 5 to 15 minutes really focused presentations for your own lobbying efforts. So I'm going to share some of them as highlights, but maybe before going deeper, the broader takeaways from the keynote. It does take ages, like years, for a jurisdiction to truly adopt rules as code. And by adoption, right, I'm talking more than just having one prototype. I'm talking about this is part of daily business in at least one production environment. It takes very, very long. I won't go in depth now about why, and there are very good reasons and some bad reasons for it, but that's just a constant that we can notice. And each jurisdiction has its own path for adoption, right? For some, it will start with community, and for some others, it will start with one very strong minister, and for another one, it will start with the innovation agency, and for another one, it will start with this whole of government, let's experiment approach. And it's fine. It's fine. It's also very, very much related to the political opportunities in each jurisdiction and the way they are laid out, right? A state as centralized as France would have had a hard time going through a distributed way of doing it. But a federal state would be hard-pressed to have a centralized push and what would be the authority to apply those, right? So it's fine, and it also makes our lives harder in a way when we try to convince for rules as code adoption, because we need to really understand how each jurisdiction works and what is their architecture for decision making and where it makes sense to start with. However, the good news is that the cases are building up, and so we have more and more, like a bigger and growing portfolio of jurisdictions that have adopted rules as code in one way or another, which I think will be useful for all of us, as we can increasingly point out to one jurisdiction at least that had similar obstacles or similar institutional layouts and managed to have rules as code adoption. So I think that's pretty good. Now let me again go a bit more in depth and share some of my highlights for this morning keynote. This time the first one is the first one in order as well, and it's the presentation that Nadia accepted to give. Thanks so much, Nadia. And I felt that we were kind of missing, you know, as part of all the material that's already out there, just this basic explain of actually what is rules as code and what is better rules, because we do have what is rules as code, right, from many different angles. But Nadia is kind of the author of this this seminal report on better rules, and I keep on explaining each time again and again and again, like, this is rules as code, and what a society would look like if rules as code was adopted broadly. Well, we have already described it like 8 years ago now. It's called better rules. And so people who are new to this field, they kind of at first don't get it. And then there's a click that happens and they see the whole thing and like, oh my God, it's going to be amazing. And they feel like they are inventing everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. It's good that you catch it. Also, we kind of have already written a lot about it. And it's really helpful because it kind of gives a roadmap, not a roadmap, but at least a vision. And then the roadmap depends on each jurisdiction. And unfortunately, since people don't like to read, so each time I point to the better rules report, I feel like, nah, they didn't read it in the end. So I give them this 5 minutes pitch, and I'm super, super proud and glad that that is actually the person who coined that term and wrote it, who is now on the record for us to share the explainer with. So yeah, I hope that this can be useful for everyone, and that we can all save a few precious minutes each week by pointing to that presentation rather than repeating it ourselves. Yeah, so that's cool. Another highlight, and I swear that I did not choose them because the people were coming. I did not know, but the another one is Haruko's presentation, who shared a case study of how one country, in this case Japan, moves towards adoption of rules as code. And I was very, very eager to have this presentation, and once more very thankful that it was given by a person as qualified as Haruko, who wrote, co-authored several of the reports that informed the Digital Agency of Japan. And bringing these people on stage is super important, because I hope that it can help more of the practitioners here to understand just how long and multifactorial adoption in a country is. I feel that I've become that old annoying person whenever there's someone who comes to me and say, yeah, we're going to get this country. I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, I've been there quite a few times, and it's going to take ages because the one contact you have here might be convinced, but oh boy, you need to have like so much more. So having this in-depth presentation of one specific country, I feel is very, very useful to understand just the time it takes at government scale. But I'm also very excited for what it shows of the direction of a country as important as Japan. So yeah, I really encourage you to watch this presentation. It's less than 10 minutes to watch, and if you're into international development of rules as code, I think it's an important one to get. Tim is not here today, but several of you have, of course, read his article and maybe have been lucky enough to talk with him about all the stuff he could not write about, but we have this economic incentive for rules as code, where more than a year ago, they were commissioned to assess the return on investment of a rules as code solution. And for practitioners and people who lobby for more rules as code adoption, this is honestly gold. This is more than gold. This is platinum. This is diamond. Because like the conclusion is, with conservative hypothesis, we have a 1 to 2.6 ratio of return on investment. once more, this has been written, this has been shared, and now I hopefully have provided you all with 5 minutes recap of this. So share it. This is going to be useful for all of us in the next years, especially because Tim concludes, and I fully agree with him that this was done 2 years ago, and since then the tooling maturity has evolved quite a bit. So most likely the costs have decreased. So even with constant results, the return on investment is probably now in the higher versions of that. And my last highlight, absolutely biased, but I own it. It's state of OpenFisca. So it's this like rapid fire around the world thingy where we just go from one country to the next under 2 minutes for each country. If you're curious, it takes about 20 minutes to watch, and I think it's really useful to get a sense of just the foothold that there is, of course, of OpenFisca, but also of RaC's code globally. We're very often focused on one jurisdiction and the few contacts we have elsewhere, and I find it always super refreshing to realize that, gosh, there are these people working super far away that I never heard of, and actually they've been working on this for ages as well. I find this very encouraging, and reminds us that we're part of this much broader community. If you don't take the time to watch these 20 minutes, then at least maybe one of the things is Canada is making its comeback. Canada had this government initiative, and for me it's a really good illustration of what I was saying earlier, that it's on and off for years. There was this model that was made with OpenFisca by the Digital Transformation Agency of Canada. And then the political steam kind of fell off and it stopped, and it's just lingered there unused for years. And of course it was frustrating and sad. And now through Japan, with the Institute for Poverty Prevention, there was this example and this connection, and now there are people in Canada in civil society who are getting super excited about reproducing this. So they have the political intention, thanks to Japan, and turns out they already have this basis of model that's been staying there. Of course, it's not maintained, it's not up to date, but the first effort is so much lower thanks to the remnants that were produced under open source licenses, that they've been able within a week to create a new front end and already have a first prototype. So it's very exciting to see that. For those of you who followed, I was touring through the Pacific region before ending in Canberra with the conference, and really the Pacific region is really strong on RaC's code and growing. I'm just going to give one example. It's a tiny set of islands literally in the middle of the Pacific. I'm talking about Tahiti, French Polynesia, 300,000 population. But they already have modeled their two biggest government income with OpenFisca, and it's been in production for like 5 years. And I literally had to go there to hear about this story. So I've tried to bring them on stage. But think about how many other cases there are that we have never heard of, until someone actually goes on the ground and talks with the people. They're like, oh, so you mean you're literally doing that? They're collecting VAT through OpenFisca. This is their first income. Every company fills in a form, and the VAT is calculated by OpenFisca, and it's been there for years. Their second biggest income, also focused on businesses, has also been modeled and is in production for over a year now. And they are very straightforward about it. Like, they are happy with it, and they're just prioritizing by what is bringing the most money in. And so after these two that are already in production, they already have the next 3 ones lined up. And so that's the tax office and the interministerial direction for digital affairs is witnessing this and is now keen on providing OpenFisca as a platform for other ministries and agencies to use as well. So it's the sort of gold nuggets that you find, and I'm sure there are many others. So really, it's a 2-minute presentation in the middle of state of OpenFisca, and I encourage you to have a look at it if you haven't done so far. All right. Now, in the afternoon, so these were not recorded. It was showcases. My main takeaways, as I was just sharing earlier, is there are always more use cases that you didn't know about. You think you know a lot, and actually there's someone who comes up and like, oh, I've been working on this and I just open sourced it, but it's been 3 years. Like this Australian guy who just says, oh, I've been doing an MCP server, and also like you can just now interconnect OpenFisca with any LLM thanks to this piece of open source software. Yeah, I've been working on it for a year, but I only open sourced it 2 weeks ago. Okay, well, thanks for letting us know. I think that's kind of a cool announcement, you know. So you always have these surprises, and it's refreshing to know that our field, while still niche, has so many people working on cool stuff. Another observation is how it seems to me that a lot of the innovation is coming outside of government. Of course, not very surprising, right? But still, it's interesting to keep in mind and to make sure to always have an eye also on the smaller actors, because I know, especially if we're in the industry, we tend to focus on the broader, bigger markets and focus on government adoption. Of course, that's where more money is, that's where more stability is. But still, having a look and being connected with NGOs is, I believe, very, very important. Also, because of the adoption system that I described earlier, where often government will be incentivized to adopt a technology because civil society has made such a compelling demonstration for it. And of course, the elephant in the room, AI. I think that everyone is talking and wondering about AI, but from my perspective, I feel that what we are seeing so far is either indeed a strong increase in output for very specific steps in the rules as code process, or experimentation for broader systems, but nothing that seems to be ready for production yet. So as we all know, these things change fast, and I guess if Max was here, he would probably disagree. But from what I'm seeing here, what I saw at the conference, and what I see in all the discussions I'm having, it's like, yes, of course, AI is everywhere. But so far, the improvements that I see are incremental and narrowly scoped. And we're still not seeing a fundamental shift. It's not like everything that was done in the last 10 years is questioned. Like the AI marketing people will try and tell you that all of a sudden you should throw away everything and just put an LLM agent in its place. That's not what I'm seeing anywhere. So I will again give a few highlights for this showcase. There's Benefit Navigator from GovTech Tokyo. So it's this broader reuse of the Project Inclusive, so the civil society organization from Japan that drew attention. And now GovTech Tokyo is offering a way for all inhabitants of the Tokyo prefecture to get access to their benefits. Their system is integrated within the Tokyo Metropolitan app that already has over 5 million installs. So we're talking about very, very big user base here, right? So very, very interesting one. From a rules as code perspective, I don't think there's anything completely new. And this is in no way diminishing the importance of this, but for our community, I believe that that we don't have much to learn from the tool itself, but for the delivery, yes, absolutely. Fascinating to see how being integrated in a super app enables delivery at scale immediately, instead of trying to convince people that your new user interface that was enabled by rules as code is so much better that you should try and adopt it now. Japan still, there is this policy innovation approach of, once more, this is taken by civil society, right? Of what they call OpenFisca Zero. So having this model of social benefits and combining it with data, with population data, synthetic population data for 10,000 people, they are basically arguing that they can reproduce the current redistribution system with just one single function. So instead of adding layers and layers and layers of redistribution systems, having just one consolidated one that can replicate almost exactly what is currently done in terms of redistribution. But of course, in terms of policy delivery and activation, it's incredibly easier if you just have one thing to ask for. So this relates to UBI, Universal Basic Income, and others. This is not fundamentally new, but it's in a new jurisdiction, and they have built a user interface that is available online, where people can also adjust through sliders some of the constants of this redistribution function. So anyone could argue that they feel that we should take more money away from, I don't know, people with less than X number of children, or people who own more, who get more than this or whatever, and redistribute it to this amount. So it's really policy design for public debate. Once more, we have seen this a few times, but this one is really polished and is live now. So if you have people you want to convince of the relevance of rules as code for democratic debate, I really encourage you to have a look at it. And finally, my last highlights, for which I will take about 2 minutes because I'm really completely in love with it, is how New Caledonia did not reform its housing tax law. This is honestly one of the sessions that I really regret that we could not record, because it's such an amazing use case for all of us. So New Caledonia is this territory that had very strong social tension about 2 years ago, to the extent that many of the infrastructures were destroyed. So there's now a lot of rebuilding, and this takes a lot of money. So of course, the budget of the state is under very strong tension, like everywhere, but there more. And there was one member of Congress, one parliamentarian, who is part of the leading party there, who identified housing support as one of the important expenses for the state, and concluded that decreasing the envelope, the total cost, by 20 to 30% would be an efficient way to free some of the budget of the state for some of the very important critical infrastructure rebuilding. And the bill was about 80% complete, was almost ready to be presented to Congress. But the Digital Innovation Agency there, who had been working with OpenFisca for quite some time, managed to suggest to maybe have a look at modeling the impact of this with OpenFisca, which was done. And for the first 3 weeks or so, there were these meetings with the parliamentarians, their office, and the Digital Transformation Agency, with this little prototype that would enable them to show, well, if you decrease the support by 25%, here is the consequences on some typical cases. So family with 2 children, blah, blah. And here are the consequences for the budget of the state. And the story goes with, for 2-3 times, it's mostly operated by the Innovation Agency. But at some point, the parliamentary office starts asking, could we just have like a user interface or a way to integrate this with our spreadsheets, because we really would like to have more of these simulations and not depend on you, which is then done and delivered. And they start making more and more, kind of freaking out a bit about just the consequences. Long story short, after 3 months of this, the bill is entirely rewritten, and it's not anymore about decreasing the housing support envelope, but actually about finding a new source of revenue to pay for this on a more perennial basis. Finding a new tax in any country nowadays seems to be absolutely impossible. And so knowing that in a context where there was such strong tension, a policy that was deemed by decision makers to have such undefensible social consequences, thanks to policy modeling, and stopping that before it gets delivered, before shit hits the fan, before literally people would again be back on the street and burning things down, I think is quite a strong case for rules as code. Because had it not been for this modeling, this would have been put in production. This would have been voted in. There's no doubt about it. It was on the way. So being able to catch this and change it is, from my perspective, a really, really, really rare case where we're getting much closer to better rules. We're still not at the thing where we deliver the whole pipeline, but we caught this before, right? And it was changed entirely thanks to the modeling. I was already fascinated with this, and that's why I curated this talk in. But then during the talk, I learned about one more detail, and this made it even better. And this enabled, this made me see a use case for rules as code that I had barely thought of. Turns out there is this additional little detail about the new tax that has been created to fund housing support is based on businesses. So businesses will have to pay a bit more. And do you know how they managed to get buy-in and no backfire at all? Because before putting the bill in Parliament, they invited business representatives to the table and showed them the simulations. And it's an island that has been going through tensions that one could qualify of near to civil war. So no business owner there has any incentive of taking the risk of the country being on fire again, right? So they sit at the table and like, well, do you prefer to pay 10% more in tax, or do you prefer to take this risk? And that's how you get the bill adopted, and everybody agrees to it. I found that really, really fascinating, because I always thought of rules as code as a way to better design better policy. But here, using it as a way to also increase agreement to taxation is incredible. So I really wanted to share this with you. I will do my best to get this recorded or published somewhere, but of course it's very hard for civil servants to have this. So far you have at least this recording somewhere for that. I know we're getting short on time, so I will just wrap up with one last thing that we announced. So the OpenFisca Association is opening this year working groups. As we've seen, the rules as code community is very widely distributed. We have people from everywhere in the world working on very different topics, and we're super happy for that. But it also somehow makes it a bit hard sometimes to get working on one specific area. So we're trying to solve this by creating working groups. So we still have this very large user base that's global, but then we want to create these little bonfires around which people can gather and talk on specific use cases. So with the first two ones that we have are on AI-assisted contributions. What does it mean? What are the requirements? So on and so forth, because it's a very big deal. And benefits assessment tools. As I mentioned, this is a very recurring use case for everyone in the rules as code community, especially for OpenFisca. We have these in production in several countries. And we know that many of the questions that are asked about delivery, design, all this is very recurring. So we hope to create more international collaboration, not on rules as code in general, but really, hey, I'm also operating one of those. What are your challenges? And how did you solve this last time? And so on and so forth. So we're really increasing collaboration internationally. The OpenFisca Association will provide support through mostly governance and legitimacy. So we don't want to be the people who know better. Really, our members know better. But getting these conversations over a longer time period, how do you make decisions in a way that is traceable, that has value? How do you provide all the tooling for gathering and all this? Well, we do have expertise on this, and so this is precisely what we want to support the working groups on. We're starting by opening the working groups to association members only. It's quite easy to join the OpenFisca Association, so if you want to join one of those, just join the association. To prevent having too many working groups, as we're still in the learning process, you need to get them sponsored or signed off somehow by one of our few senior contributors, so people who have been working on this field for years and years and years, and who will confirm that this is of very high value to the community. Happy to talk more about that if you have any curiosity. Yeah, and finally, just wanted to say that putting together this conference is a lot of work, and we've been able to do this thanks to, first and foremost, our members, people, organizations who support the OpenFisca Association, give us credibility, and do provide the funds that are necessary for that, to our sponsors as well, which Joe reminded us of. Who made us able to have the event at a physical location with food and all that, and to a lot of work from our volunteers who put all of this together, people who've been working on the program, but also people just on site, like Nadia Haruko, who just showed up and provided support on the day. So thanks a lot to everyone, and thank you for your attention.
That was a massive download, Maddie. I'm glad we've recorded it, because there's so much detail to go back into. Thank you. Very, very good. And for being the leadership that's needed in rules as code and bringing all of this together. Really appreciate it. There must be questions in the room. If not, or as always, I have questions. Who wants to jump in first?
I just wanted to say thank you to Matti for all the work he put into organising this. He went above and beyond, and alongside Pia as well, who organised a lot of the speakers, the incredible standard of speakers and presentations we saw there with Pia's obviously tireless work, Pia Andrews. So just recognising both their incredible efforts in pulling together this in such a short time frame, but it was delivered at such high quality. It was a fantastic conference.
Any questions? We are at the top of the hour, so we don't have very much time. Okay, I'm going to ask a question then. So Japan being so far ahead is a total surprise. I was there last year briefly for a period of time with a blockchain project that I'm involved in, and the whole idea of digital twins and digital public infrastructure was all the buzz at that conference that I went to, but nobody mentioned rules as code. It's unbelievable to me. So the buy-in that's happened was that, because I'm going to go and watch that video, the buy-in from the government has been over how many years, did you say? Can you tell us just a little bit more about that story from what you know?
I would say this is a question for Haruko more than for myself.
Oh, Haruko, yes.
Hi. Thank you, Matti. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone, for organizing today's talk as well. The question, Joe, the Digital Agency of Japan was formed in 2021, and the mission since then was to provide up-to-date law data and also promote reuse of law data. These two are the key issues for them. And when looking at modernization in these two fields, 5 years ago, we sought that overseas because there are so many cases in Japan. And that project went on for just over 4 years, much to our surprise, because there are so many interesting things going out. But during those 4 years, like GovTech Tokyo and Professor Shiratori's NPO, these civil tech projects GovTech Tokyo isn't civil tech, they're government institutions, but these peer projects have sprung during those courses. So this is it's going to be, I think there'll be more cases from now on that we can report to you.
I look forward to hearing. At the conference that I was at, Audrey Tang was a speaker.
Ah, that conference, right.
Yeah. So she was talking about the sick pack of care and essentially civic activation.
Yes.
And the Taiwanese model, how that loop works between civil society and government public servants. And yeah, I'm gonna reach out to you and find more about how that works and whether the Taiwanese model has been the inspiration for what's happening in Japan.
I can't say I know very well of that project, but I'll keep my eyes on and forward anything comes up. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, Haruki. Anybody else? Philippa, do you have anything to say? Because you were there too. If you can talk. I don't know whether you can talk.
I was, but I'm having massive difficulties with my internet. There's a terrible storm here and it's playing havoc with my internet. So I've been sort of the video and audio has been off. The video's been off the whole time and the audio's been dropping in and out. But yeah, the conference was a fantastic event. And in fact, there was quite a few people on this call who were there because Con was there and Haruka was there as well. But yeah, it was amazing. Both days were fantastic. Like Matti, I did really enjoy the New Caledonia case study. And yeah, there was some interesting ones, not so much about rules as code, but on the first day as well, that looked at sort of how we can do adaptive policy that were sort of more non-technical approaches. And they were really interesting as well, to take sort of a step back and think about it from that perspective. But yeah, it was fantastic 2 days, and it was great to see people in person in our remote lifestyle. So yeah, really enjoyed it, and thanks, echoing Con's thanks to Pia and Matti for organising it. Wish you were there, Joe.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the next one.
Yes.
Nadia, hey, maybe we should be running the next one in New Zealand.
Well, yes, and so of course Nadia was there.
Yeah, I did say to Matti, give me 2 years.
Get my feet up the table first.
Another nation has claimed next year, I understand.
Right. There you go.
I said we're doing in a different continent each year, so sorry. Then
Yeah.
New Zealand will not be for next year.
We're not a continent, so that's okay.
Yes.
A group of islands. No, I really enjoyed it, and again, thank you so much to Matti, and giving me the opportunity to talk about the better rules stuff that was awesome. And I've already using the video of my presentation in my new role, and it's really starting to take hold, the concepts, a lot of the thinking around they didn't have words for it. But I'm working on a huge transformation program in the New Zealand government, and a lot of what the outcomes of rules of code are the types of outcomes that they're looking for. So I have high hopes for things that we can do there, and I've been getting a lot of the policy people really, really excited about the opportunities in this space as well. So yeah, it's still a little early days, but putting together proposals for where we can go next. Yeah, so this conference was a fantastic launch pad into that. Yeah, it was awesome timing for me personally. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. We are a little bit over time. I will let everybody know that's coming across this video in the future that all of the details of the OpenFisca conference that happened in March 2026, all of the details, the links to the talks that we've heard about tonight from Matti, and other information from the conference are available on the website, which will be on the racguild.org website, and that's where you can find it. You'll also find a Slack channel, a link to join a Slack channel, which is the Rules as Code Guild Slack channel, where you can have conversations with all the lovely people that you've been watching in our webinar this evening. Go to racguild.org, sign up, and come back on the first Wednesday in June, which is the 3rd of June 2026. It's a different time zone for everybody, so it'll be early, it will be morning for those of us in Oceania. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you there. Do come along. You'll get a calendar invite in your Google Calendar if you sign up through racguild.org. Again, Matti, thank you for coming this evening and for preparing all of your highlights from the conference and all the work that you did to put it together. And we look forward to seeing everybody at the next racguild.org meetup in June. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, and get your chopsticks ready for next year.